Hello, friends, and welcome to this edition of Coming In for a Landing. I am your host, Paul Hudrick, and in this edition, we are dedicated to your questions. I asked for a few questions. You guys gave me a whole bunch, and I am glad to answer them. And I really just want to get right into it. So, kicking right off the top, I'm gonna butcher your name, man. I apologize. Remy Kumernicki. Question about Sam Cassell, his role with the team so far. Is Sam Cassell basically dedicated to helping Ben develop his game, or does he have a more general role in the coaching staff? What kind of work do you believe he is doing with Ben, and are we seeing some of the results? So, Sam is definitely Doc's, Dave Yeager, I would say, is probably Doc's right-hand man, but Sam is definitely right there as well, a very influential voice on that bench. And yes, he has done a lot with Ben Simmons, but it's a general role. You see a lot. He's worked a lot with Tobias Harris as well. So as much as we want to give Doc Rivers credit for Tobias Harris' success, rightfully so, a great deal of it goes towards Sam Cassell too. Sam Cassell's done a really nice job. When you're at the games early, Tobias likes to get his pregame work done, pretty early. He's one of the first guys to kind of warm up and do that and do his thing. Sam Cassell's right there with him, just like he is with Ben Simmons. And I'm sure that's helped him an awful lot along the way. As far as Ben specifically, I think the biggest things you're seeing with Ben where Sam has helped, one is the turnovers. When, the West Coast swing, I think as much as we all, rightfully talked about how good Ben was scoring the basketball and how much more aggressive he played, he was excellent from a turnover standpoint that entire trip. He had 4 in the Utah game, but you'll trade that off when he scores 42 points and almost has a triple-double. So there's a trade-off there. But even before that, I don't think he had any more than 2 in the previous 3 games. I mean, he's just been taking so much better care of the basketball. No more of those kind of blind passes where he picks up his dribble or around the free throw area and tosses it back to no one. He's just taking significantly better care of the basketball. More of his turnovers recently have been offensive fouls, which to me, I can live with that because that is a sign of him being aggressive and him trying to make something happen. So I don't mind an offensive foul turnover. So I think that's one big area. And then the free throws. Ben has been much better from the free throw line. I think he was 11 to 12 or 12 to 13 in Utah. And even before that, he'd been shooting the ball much better. He's over 70% over his last 8 games or so. So I think Sam has done a lot for Ben. I think, and it's just, there's little things, there's just little nuances in the game, little things you pick up. And I think what Sam has done well, at least from the outside looking in, this isn't me having any inside knowledge, but I think what Sam has done well is really focus on what Ben can do. Because I think a lot, and I'm guilty of it, we're all guilty of it, focusing so much on what Ben can't do. I think what Sam has done well and Doc Rivers has done well, and really the staff as a whole, is focus on what can Ben do, what is he comfortable doing, and how can we maximize that. And I think you're seeing some of that. You see the comfortability, around the paint with his right hand. There's just no denying it. He seems to have better touch around the rim with that right hand. He's got that little right hand hook that he goes to in the post. So I think it's just like these little kind of nuances of the games and the way he attacks defenses and getting him to do things that he does well and maximize those skills. I think that's big of what Sam and the whole staff has done. So, Sam has done a great job, I think, for the entire team, but Tobias and Ben, I think he's done the most for, and you're really seeing it. Sam Cassell's done a hell of a job, and I think it's only a matter of time before that guy gets a job of his own. So, it's almost like with Monty Williams when he was here with Brett Brown. We all knew it was almost like a matter of time before a job opened up and Monty was going to get it, and I think it's going to be the same with Sam. I think he's done a great job, and I think he's going to get a head coaching opportunity in pretty much no time here. Yeah, thanks for the question, Jeremy. I appreciate it, man. Moving on to Jeff Stewart. Jeff, I know is a very loyal listener. I appreciate your support, Jeff. Jeff asks, were we expecting too much from Shake Milton? He was struggling quite a bit, shooting before he went down with his injury. Not sure if he is as bad as he's shown recently. Don't think he's as good as he's flashed early. What do you expect going forward? I'll say, Jeff, I think he is good. I think he's very good. I think the one thing that I'm a little, when I look at Shake, from the season, I love the way he's attacking. I love the way he's been more aggressive this year. I love the way he's using ball screens. He's shown way more ability to hit difficult shots, contested shots. I think that's the added muscle from this past offseason. I think that's helped. I think he's become a much better defender. It's a shame. I thought the Sacramento game where he went down, I thought that was his best two-way game of the season. The job he did on Buddy Hield in the second half, and he would have closed that game out if he hadn't gotten hurt. I thought he was excellent in that game. His shooting has been down. That's the thing that's kind of disappointed me the most. In a weird way, though, that's almost reassuring to me, because I think that's the one skill set that all of us going into the season, we knew Shake Milton could shoot the basketball. I mean, he's over 40% last year, does it off the dribble, does it off catch and shoot, does it off ball screens. I mean, he can hit shots. He can score. He can hit threes. His three-point shooting is down this year a little bit. And to me, again, that's encouraging, because I expect that to go up. And I also think it's a product of when I look at that second unit right now, and, you don't need to be an analytics whiz to know that when there is just a significant drop-off when the bench comes in, the starters can hang with anybody. And I mean that. That starting five, I think, can hang with any starting five in the entire NBA, including the Brooklyn Nets. I really, truly mean that. But when you start getting to teams' bench, other teams' benches, and the depth that they lack, and it's, when it's that all-bench unit, right, when it's Shake and four bench guys, sometimes it's Tobias in there, with Mike Scott recently being out, but there's just so much pressure on Shake because, quite frankly, I mean, we all know the Furkan Korkmaz experience. I mean, either the guy is red hot or he's ice cold, and in defense, he's a pretty big liability. He's improved somewhat in that area, but he's still a pretty big liability on that end. So, that inconsistency from a guy like Korkmaz hurts. Matisse Thybulle has played at an unbelievable level defensively, and he's been crucial, really, to the team's success. To me, what he did in Sacramento against De'Aaron Fox, we all talk about how great Ben Simmons was on Damian Lillard. Let's not sleep on how good Matisse Thybulle was on his chances to guard Damian Lillard and other guys on the trip. I mean, he's just been so good. Was great against the Rockets. I mean, you just see how good he's been defensively. But offensively, that's just not, he doesn't have the game yet. He's an inconsistent jumper, really doesn't have much off the dribble. And I think the one thing that he can really learn from a Danny Green, and I get Danny Green has been very hot and cold this year as well, but the spacing, Danny Green really understands floor spots, where to be. And I think that's when we look at, a little off topic, when we look at Joel Embiid's success, I think that's part of it. I think, as much as I think Josh Richardson is clearly a better overall basketball player than Danny Green at this point in their respective careers, I think Danny Green just understands spacing so well from being around so many talented players and just knowing where he needs to be on the floor. And I think that's something you can't overlook. Same with Seth Curry. Both of those guys are just really understand spacing, really understand where to be. And I think that's been crucial to Joel Embiid's success. But then as it relates to Matisse Thybulle, I don't think he's quite there yet. He doesn't have those instincts where he doesn't really 100% know where to be on the floor at all times and kind of the best spots to attack. And I think that's hurt that second unit offensively. Then you look at the four spot. It's been weird. They've had Tobias in there at times at the four, and that's helped a little bit because Tobias has had he's having a great season. But I do think that's also overextended Tobias a bit. Mike Scott, Mike Scott's just, again, kind of like Korkmaz in the sense of being so hot and cold, where if he's hot, you just find him and get him the ball and just let him shoot. But if he's cold, I mean, it's tough to know, what else can he bring to your team? He's tough. He'll give you tough minutes. He'll commit good fouls, good professional fouls, as we call them. He'll do all those kind of little things. But, and of course, Dwight Howard is in there for his rebounding and his toughness, his rim protection. But offensively, again, he's really not providing you much. I thought he was better. It was the Utah game. I thought that was maybe Dwight's best game as a Sixer so far, where he had a lot of really nice plays around the rim, some really good touch. But I think this is all a long-winded way to say I think Shake Milton needs help. I think he is good. I think he's legitimately a good basketball player that can help this team and will help this team. And I think you're seeing how much they are missing him right now. But I think he needs help. He needs another ball handler, another shot creator, someone to help him generate offense, take a little bit of pressure off him. I think will go a long way. So I think, I think Shake is 100% part of the solution for this team. I think he is a really good basketball player. I think he's perfect in his role as like that sixth man, scoring off the bench type player. and I think he can really excel, and I think he can help this team in the playoffs as well in that role. I would like to see his shot, that 3-point percentage come up a little bit, but I believe that it will, because I think he's capable, and I think he's just off to kind of a slow start in that regard, but we'll see when he comes back from his injury. And again, thank you so much, Jeff, for the question. I appreciate it, man. Next one is from Adam Rosenberg. Adam asks, has any Eastern Conference team done well on West Coast trips this season? Well, it's funny you should ask, Adam, because actually the Brooklyn Nets are in the midst of an excellent West Coast swing. They just beat the Lakers. They've done a really nice job out there. They beat the Suns, had a big comeback win. I think they were down like 24, came back to beat the Suns. So, but in general, yeah, I mean, it's just the West Coast swings are tough, man. I mean, even not in this season, which is bizarre in its own right, when you factor in, everything with COVID and all that and all the health and safety protocols. That's adding to it enough and making travel even harder. But in general, those trips aren't easy. And then when you look at who the 4 teams the Sixers just played, the Kings were red hot coming in. The Suns were one of the hottest teams in the NBA before they lost to Brooklyn. I think they had won like 7 straight, and they've been playing really good basketball. Portland has Dame Lillard, who is, arguably the best scorer in the NBA right now, and Gary Trent Jr. has been playing out of his mind. They've I don't want to say they haven't missed CJ McCollum, because CJ McCollum was having an outstanding season before he got hurt, but Gary Trent is really stepping in and kind of filling that void that he's left. And then Utah Jazz, they're the best team in the NBA right now. They're the best record. They're hot. And you didn't have Joel Embiid, and that's the other thing too. I think we all have to. We all kind of want to have these like barometer measuring stick kind of games. But it's hard when so many guys, and this is the entire NBA. It's not just the Sixers. The Sixers is Joel Embiid. The other night it was Ben Simmons. When guys are out, it's hard to get a gauge of how good teams are. The Brooklyn Nets, yes, they beat the Lakers. You can't take that away from them. Anthony Davis didn't play. Dennis Schroeder didn't play. So it's just, it's one of those things. I was taught early on as a sports journalist, context matters. Nothing happens in a vacuum. There's other things at play. It's not just black and white. So, yes, you can look at the Sixers road trip and say 1-3. Yeah, that's disappointing. You would have liked to see them do better. But at the same time, that's tough, man. It's really tough. Those West Coast swings are really difficult, and they're difficult for everyone. The Nets are making it look easy at the moment. But when you look at, Boston kind of had an up and down one. The Bucks are really struggling right now. They just came off a West Coast swing, and they did not fare very well on it. So it's the NBA. These things happen. The Sixers are home, and the schedule isn't exactly easy, but it's easier than those West Coast games, and they're not playing, they also played some really good basketball teams. So I think that's all a factor. And again, West Coast swings, difficult every year, not just this year. So I think, Adam, that's a great point that you raised, just the fact that, not that many teams have done great with the exception of the Nets right now. Thanks again, Adam, for the question. I appreciate it, man. Next one is coming from Mike Glenn. Mike Glenn asked, do you think a little losing streak like this is good in that it shows the areas the team needs to be improved most? Obviously, no one wants to lose, but sometimes if you're winning, you ignore the trouble spots. It's a fair point. Yeah, because you're right. You don't want to lose. Like the Sixers clearly did not want to go 1-3 on their West Coast swing. They would have liked to finish 4-0. But it's the reality that you're going to lose games. And I do think, Danny Green had mentioned he thought it was kind of a wake-up call, some of those games that they played. So I thought that was an interesting comment from him, from a guy who's a veteran, who's seen it all, who's been around championship teams. For him to say that they kind of, it was like a wake-up call, I thought was a pretty telling statement from Danny Green. So there's that, and then it's just, when you look at the West Coast swing, I think the one thing it did is it revealed a couple of pretty big weaknesses on this team. One, as I already talked about, is the bench. You need upgrades. At least one upgrade. I think you need at least a guard, a preferably a comparable point, a competent, point guard that can shoot the basketball. If you can get that, I think that would elevate this bench in a big way. With all due respect to Shake Milton and Tyrese Maxey, I think having a veteran guy to run the show could really help this team in a big way down the stretch and in the playoffs. And then I also think just 3-point shooting, they have more of it than they did last year. They need even more. They need the guys who they brought in to be 3-point shooters to do it. You need Seth Curry firing at every opportunity. You need Danny Green firing at every opportunity. Furkan Korkmaz, even Matisse Thybulle, when these shots are open, these guys got to take them. You can't hesitate. And you saw on the West Coast trip, 3 points is more than 2, and that hurt the Sixers in multiple games on that trip. So I think that's a big part of it. Is this road trip, as much as it was tough for the Sixers, it gave you a glimpse into two big areas where I think they can improve, and I think some of it is going to come on Daryl Morey in the front office to make a move or two and just upgrade the roster and upgrade the bench. And another part of it is just the team. The team's got to be better. They have to do more. They have to take more threes. They can't pass up those opportunities. They have to be aggressive when they get them. They can't hesitate. They have to fire away. And so, yeah, in a weird way, Mike, I do think losing in a weird way does kind of it lets you learn about your team a little bit. So I think that is a fair point. Thanks again for the question, Mike. Next, okay, your handle, I can't really decipher what your name is. Your name is Sports Are Back, but I'm just going to read the question. A lot of talk about Kyle Lowry being a trade target. How do you see him? How do you see him as a fit? Can't see him coming off the bench. Would also take Green or Curry out of the starting lineup and possibly move Ben to the power forward. Feels like it would cause too much shuffling. Well, a couple things to unravel. I did write, recently for 97.3, we compiled a list of trade targets, and Kyle Lowry was a guy on my list. The issue right now is with the way the Eastern Conference looks, the Raptors probably aren't going anywhere. They're probably going to be in this thing till the end. There's rumors that they might be trying to get Andre Drummond. I don't know how much that improves them, but that's a whole other story. The point is, I don't know that Lowry would be available. If he is, now he is in the last year of his contract. He isn't, he's on the, downside of his career, but he's still playing pretty well. Still playing at a pretty high level, shooting the ball at a pretty high level. Kyle Lowry's one of those guys who just does everything, all the little things, all the dirty work. He's a bulldog. He's just really not afraid to get his nose dirty, and he's a guy that you would love to have. Like, he is a winning basketball player. One of those guys that when he's not on your team, you hate him. When he's on your team, you love him. So from a fit standpoint for the Sixers, you make it work. You figure it out. Any trade that Lowry would have, Danny Green would most likely have to be involved, so that would kind of sort itself out in that regard, because Danny Green, he would basically just take Danny Green's spot in the starting lineup. I don't think it would be a problem for Ben Simmons to then play more of a power forward role. We saw in that game against Utah how good he was as a screener and a roller and how many opportunities that afforded him. So from that standpoint, I would applaud that move. I think it would be great to have another guy that can handle the basketball to take pressure off Ben, and then also kind of really bring out that element of Ben's game where he can be a screener and a roller. So I'd have no problem from that standpoint. My concern would be Seth Curry and Kyle Lowry as your starting backcourt, and the size. I think Kyle's like 6 feet and Seth's like 6'2". Now Kyle plays a lot bigger than that because he is so tough, because he is so big, and he's so thick and so strong. Like he plays the game a lot bigger than a 6-foot guy would, and because of his ability to take charges and just beat guys to spots, he's so good at that. So I think that would be a concern, but at the same time, I think it's a risk I would be willing to take, because I think what Kyle Lowry could bring to your team as a ball handler, as a steady influence, and maybe even help the second unit out a little bit. You stretch him out, maybe let him play with the second unit guys a little bit, and have Ben have a run. I think it just gives you more options. I think and it makes you better, flat out. I think, if Kyle Lowry somehow were available, again, I don't believe that he's going to be, but if he were to be, acquire him and figure it out, because I think he's just so talented. He can add so much to your team that I think it would 100% be worth it. And thank you again so much for the question. All right, and we are moving right along here. Another one where I apologize because I just really don't. Everyone's got weird handles and stuff. Mine's just my name, and so is my name. Like, my username is just my name too, but everyone's got weird stuff. But anyway, this question is: would Blake Griffin make sense as a buyout target, or is he done/washed? So, as a buyout target, I wouldn't say no immediately from keeping this in mind. If he is willing to be a bench player and play a stretch 4, stretch 5 role, I would consider it. He hasn't shot the ball very well this year with the Pistons, but I also think that could be a byproduct of the team he's playing with and him not being in the greatest situation where he's not happy and he's just, mentally not playing his best basketball because of that. So I think that's one way you got to look at it. Again, we talk about context. I think he hasn't played that much, and when he has played, it hasn't been in an ideal scenario for him. So I just don't know what opportunities Blake has. Could a team like, I don't know, the Nets or the Bucks, could they offer him a bigger role than the Sixers to play a more meaningful spot? Or, maybe a reunion with the Clippers, or, maybe go to the Lakers. I don't know. Portland. I don't know what those other teams are looking for. I don't know what they're offering him. But if Blake still has a good relationship with Doc and he's willing to be a 4 off the bench and a stretch 5 at times, he can still rebound. He's still big. He's still strong. He's got good touch around the rim. You could go to him in the post as a scoring option. Again, maybe take a little bit of pressure off of Shake Milton. I think that could help when lineups happen that where Dwight Howard is really, quite frankly, just kind of getting killed by smaller big men, more mobile big men. You could go to Blake and maybe use him in that spot. I mean, again, Blake is not. We're all realizing Blake is not that guy anymore. He's just not that. He's not Lob City Blake anymore. He's not. That doesn't mean he can't be a useful basketball player. He's become different. He's evolved. He's got touch. He can shoot a little bit. He's got a mid-range shot. He stretches his game out to the 3. Again, not shooting that well this year, but the year before that and the year before that, very good from 3, especially for a guy his size. So I think there are skills, there are things that would make sense. Now, I'm not going to beat down the door for the guy, but if he's willing to take a bit of a piece of humble pie, kind of like we saw with Carmelo Anthony, and you see how well that's worked out for Portland. If Blake's willing to do something like that here in Philly, and he can kind of fill that role and do that for Doc, I wouldn't say no to it. I guess that's the best way I put it. I'm not gung-ho about it, but I wouldn't say no to it, and I would trust Doc to be able to use him correctly, and that he would, fill that role and possibly be an upgrade for the Sixers, because they could use a player in that spot, the backup 4/stretch 5 spot. All right, and then we got one more question. This one is coming from Tyler Johnson, a guy with a name. Sweet. Hey, Tyler. Tyler asked, this is a kind of an interesting one, and at first I kind of dismissed this question, but then I thought about it more, and I kind of thought about it a little bit more and chewed on it, and I get where Tyler's coming from. I said, would moving Matisse into the starting 5 and having either Curry or Green run more with the bench unit help strengthen bench scoring? I feel like this could cover for some of the Thibel's offensive efficiencies too, but potentially just clog things and kill the spacing for our MVP. I think you kind of answered your own question a little bit, Tyler, but it's an interesting thought, because you are, like you said, you could maybe, in this instance, I would assume you bring Danny Green to the bench in this area, because I don't think you would go Seth Curry off the bench, because I really like what he does with Embiid. I think they're building more and more chemistry as they play more and more together. I really like what they have going. I like Ben and Seth Curry. I even like that. There's dribble handoffs I think are deadly. So I think I wouldn't want to separate Seth too much from those two guys. And I guess for me, the issue is Danny Green really going to help the second unit that much? As I said before, there is spacing, which Danny Green is very good at. And when he can catch fire, he can really catch fire, and, maybe help out in that regard, maybe help Shake in that regard. But, and then, offensively, with Matisse in the starting lineup, you would be losing a little bit because Matisse isn't as good there. But then also, defensively, you're gaining, because then also Ben Simmons doesn't have to start off on the toughest assignment right away. You can give that to Matisse Thybulle and maybe save Ben's energy, save Ben's fouls. So in a weird way, that could help too. So ultimately, I personally don't think it's the right move. I wouldn't do it. I probably wouldn't touch the starting lineup right now, if I'm being perfectly honest. Look, the starting lineup's done pretty damn well. Like I said before, I would put them right now up against any starting 5 in the NBA. Now, that's not to say they couldn't upgrade. Could they find another player from outside the organization that could possibly be an upgrade over Danny Green? Sure. Those kind of guys are out there, whether it's a Kyle Lowry or Victor Oladipo, one of those guys. Yeah, that to me would be an upgrade and would make your starting 5 even better. But I don't think within the organization, I don't think I'd mess with it. I think I'd leave it alone. I think even like Matisse, what he's doing right now, I think he's perfect. I think he's perfect in his role. I think he's for lack of a better term, he's starring in his role. Maybe down the road when Matisse shot starts to get a little bit more consistent, I think then maybe you look at him as more of a starting caliber player. But I also think it's kind of good to have him, if you're having struggles with the starting unit offensively, defensively, you can go to Matisse. Again, like the Sacramento game where De'Aaron Fox killed them, and then you see how well Matisse did against them, and you just ride Matisse out to close the game. So I think Doc has, Doc's not afraid, and that's the one thing I would say too that I've liked about Doc so far that Brett Brown wouldn't do. Doc isn't afraid to close out games without his starters. He'll close a game with a Matisse Thybulle. He'll close a game with a Shake Milton. If those guys are playing well and he thinks a certain lineup gives him his best chance to win, he's going to close with that guy. He's close with those guys. He's not going to have to go to his starting lineup. So, again, a long-winded way, Tyler, to say that I think it's a fair thing to pose. It's an interesting thing to think about, but I think ultimately this starting five, I would leave it as it is. Again, unless you can get an outside upgrade from another team, I think this starting five has done an excellent job, and I would probably leave it as is. But again, thank you so much for the question. I appreciate it, man. And thank you guys all so much for the questions. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you guys keeping this thing going on Coming In for Landing. I love doing it. I'm going to do more and more as the season goes on. A phenomenal guest coming. He's coming. He's a great guest. I promise. It's either next week or the week after. I promise I'm getting him. He's great. You're going to love it. But for now, I'm going to try to do more solo episodes because, hey, I really enjoy this interaction with you guys. I love answering your questions. A lot of you guys have really great questions that, again, like a question like the one I just answered, I wouldn't have thought about that, but it's something that gets my brain moving and makes me think. So it's good stuff. It's good questions. If you guys have any, please reach out to me on Twitter at Paul Hudrick or at the Coming In for Landing podcast Twitter account, all over social media. So please find me. And guys, please rate, download, comment wherever you get your podcasts. Check out Coming In for Landing. Please download and subscribe. I will talk to you guys soon. I appreciate you so much.